Beautiful. We are now live officially. Hi, Deborah. Thank you so much for joining me.
Morning, Katie.
Good morning. Good morning. So first of all, to introduce myself, hello, everybody. I'm Katie Phillips. I am the founder of the School of Self-Love. And welcome to My Menopause. This is a week-long interview series talking all things menopause. I'm beside myself excited about it. We've got 19 incredible experts lined up to talk to you, and I'm so honored to have Deborah Garlick joining us as our first speaker. And we're going to be speaking all things menopause and the workplace today. Some of you have joined us live here on Zoom. If you're here live on Zoom, then you can ask us questions. In about half an hour, we'll check out the Q&A. You'll see at the bottom of your screens that there's a little Q&A box. You can just go in there, type in your questions, and when we get to the Q&A section of this conversation, I'll pop in, see your questions, and I'll ask those directly to Deborah. If you're watching this through the Facebook Live, hello and welcome. It's good to have you. We won't be taking your questions through Facebook today, but if you do leave some questions in the Facebook feed, if Deborah has time at some point this week, she will jump in, I'm sure, and answer those questions for you. Deborah is actually launching her book this week, so it's all a bit hectic, and we'll talk about that as the interview goes on. But you can leave questions in Facebook, and she or I will get back to you sometime this week. Otherwise, I think that just leaves me to say welcome, and let's get on with it, shall we? Okay, let me just introduce the amazing Deborah Garlick and read you her bio. Deborah is passionate about helping thousands and thousands of women live better lives by raising awareness and understanding around the menopause. And she does that by changing perceptions and getting everybody talking about it. She's the director of Henpicked.net and Menopause in the Workplace. Henpicked is one of the UK's largest, fastest growing websites for women over 40. Deborah is committed to creating awareness, shifting perceptions, and educating businesses around menopause, and has been working with over 100 companies in just the last year, both UK-wide and internationally. Henpicked's new book, Menopause, The Change for the Better. I'm going to show it. Have you got it there? You got the book? There it is. Woohoo! It launches this week. It launches on the 3rd of May, and it includes expert advice from leading menopause specialists and women's stories. It's available through Bloomsbury, Waterstones, Amazon, and all good bookstores. And we have a special discount code. I'll give it to you later, so you can actually get 30% off the book, which is a very generous offer from Bloomsbury. So, Deborah, thank you so much for being here today.
I'm delighted. Thank you very much for doing this series, Katie, because it's so important to raise awareness of menopause.
Thank you, and you're so welcome. Yeah, it is. And you're doing amazing things in the world around this subject. So let's just, before we dive into more about you and what you're doing around menopause, specifically in the workplace, because this is the first interview of a week-long conference, I think we just need to really quickly address what is menopause. Would you mind just speaking to that, just defining it for the listeners, so we're just kind of all starting off on the same page?
Absolutely. Well, menopause is a natural phase in every woman's life. Actually, we generally talk about menopause as just one thing. It's actually a process of change that goes on in a woman's body. And a woman's achieved menopause, and I always say achieved menopause, Katie, because I think this is something we achieve rather than we go through. But a woman achieves menopause when she's not had a period for 12 consecutive months. And up to that point is the change process that's known as perimenopause. Peri just meaning around, and that can happen 5 years plus, or it's different for every woman. Before that one day in time when it's a woman's menopause day, she's achieved menopause. I'm sure there's a lot of women out there saying, I really wish it was just one day, but that is the point where we can say you've achieved menopause. And after that period, it is post-menopause. And we tend to use the term menopausal woman for the whole process.
Perfect. Do you know, that's helped me understand it so much. I mean, the reason why I'm running this interview series is totally selfish, because I, being 43, I'll be 44 in July, have just realized I'm in perimenopause, and I'm still kind of figuring out really what that means for me. And, you know, I've got so many questions, like how long is it going to last? What are the symptoms? How can I help myself? How can I manage it with my work? Because for me personally, brain fog has been quite a real thing. Anyway, I've got all these questions. So I thought, right, I'm going to line up all of these experts, get my questions answered. And pretty sure as I get my questions answered, it's going to be helping other people. But that's really interesting to understand that it's almost like the symptoms of menopause, that is the perimenopause phase.
A lot of the time, yes. And it's interesting that you're saying you're in perimenopause, because there's a lot of myths around menopause which we really do need to dispel. The average age for a woman to go through menopause is 51. But that's actually not where the symptoms start. The symptoms tend to start when a woman's body starts changing. Not every woman will experience symptoms, but that is a point where it's a woman's hormones being out of balance. When our hormones are in balance, we feel amazing and we're full of energy and full of life. But then as women enter into the perimenopausal period, then that's when estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, the balance changes. Doesn't necessarily mean symptoms, but when that chaos is going on, that's when we tend to notice the difference. And actually, when we've got hormonal chaos going on in our bodies, that's when we don't feel good. We feel out of whack. We may not be able to verbalize, understand ourselves exactly, or we may not even realize ourselves that we're experiencing menopausal symptoms. I didn't realise I was experiencing menopausal symptoms, and it's only what I know now that helps me understand what I went through when I was 45. I look back on it now and think, hang on, yes, I would class myself, if you asked me, I'm in my mid-50s. I went through menopause at 51. And if you asked me before we started doing all of this research, how was my menopause? I'd say I sailed through it. But what I didn't realise, and I guess this is my story that I never share, is that when I hit around about 45, I was struggling with extreme period pains. To the point of being admitted into hospital on at least one occasion for symptoms. It came on out of nowhere. I was driving to the gym and suddenly I was crippled with pain. And by the time I got to the gym, I was sent immediately to the Queen's Medical Centre, admitted for tests. They thought I might have an appendix problem or something like that. And that kept happening. And it was a real nuisance. They couldn't find anything wrong. My GP gave me painkillers, which I would be on for at least a week, usually around about 10 days of a month, which completely zombied me out. I'd got no energy. I'd spend a weekend a month in bed. And then I'd spend the next 3 weeks of a cycle catching up with work, fretting about what I might have missed. I had a very, very busy job. It was very stressful, and I would be spending my time anxious that I hadn't done something that I was supposed to. So actually, my life was very miserable at that point. I was on some sort of nasty cycle that I just couldn't get out of. And after about a year, and redundancy, I would add, on top of that, my husband and I decided that it was probably time to go private and try to get to the root cause of the problem. And we went to see an expert in London, and immediately hormone problems were, I was told I'd got hormonal problems. Still the word perimenopause not mentioned by anybody, which, you know, when you know what it is, then you can actually give it a name, you can do something about it. And within a month of HRT, my life was back to normal. I got my life back. I was completely pain-free. I had all of the energy that I had. I was, you know, looking back, I kind of lost a year of my life because I was dealing with that. And, to an extent, the painkillers were simply putting a plaster over what was going on with my symptoms. And the solution came with actually rebalancing my hormones. And from that point, I've been on HRT 7-8 years now, maybe a little bit longer. And my hormones are completely balanced. I feel great. Had a bit of hormonal acne going on there, and that's no fun in your 40s to see yourself. I'm 11 months through a 12-month cycle of Roaccutane, which is what they usually give teenagers when they have acne. So it is quite fun going to the dermatology and sitting with a lot of teenagers who usually ask me what time the clinic's open to, or are we running behind, because I look like I work there rather than being a patient. But when I look back on the time in my 40s, I would, if I'd have known what I know now, I would have probably have recognised the symptoms of my hormones are changing, I'm perimenopausal, what can we do about it? But with complete ambiguity of, we can't find anything wrong with you. They thought I had water on the ovaries. They said, we can't find anything wrong with you, so here's some painkillers. And, if I hadn't have gone and got sorted out, gone private, I'd probably still be in that cycle. And that's not a way to live.
No, it's really not. And I can relate to so much of what you just said then. And I'm so grateful to people like you who are getting this conversation around menopause out in the open, because it was only, I host a dinner event for women, and I was at a dinner a couple of months ago, and I was talking about various different physical symptoms I was having. And I was having adult acne, and I was having the most terrible period pain, and I was feeling quite down in the dumps for no reason. I was all over the place, and I was talking about all these different things. And then somebody, thank God for this angel person, said to me, maybe it's not all different things. Maybe it's one thing, and maybe you're in perimenopause. And a light bulb went on. And it was like, it's awareness. It's suddenly, there's not anything wrong with me, because that makes it worse. You just think you're a problem to be fixed. When you understand that it's a natural biological thing happening, and there are ways of managing it, hence this series, because I'm going to get totally clued up on how to manage it and have an amazing experience of it and enjoy it and have it be the rite of passage I now believe it's meant to be. Without that knowledge and understanding, we just think we're a big hot mess,
Yeah.
And so I relate to so much of what you said. And I think if you had have known 10 years ago that you were at, the beginning stages of perimenopause, you'd have sorted it quicker, and it would make you just feel normal.
Yes, and I agree with what you're saying around for you having somebody for your light bulb moment. For me, that was my husband, because we've known each other. We've been together 25 years, and it was his prompt that said maybe we should go private and get some help. And when we were in the doctors, the symptoms I was describing was, it's just the painful periods. I thought I was managing everything. I thought I'd got everything under control. And whilst I was in a vicious cycle, I thought I was okay. But during that meeting, I think he burst. I think he couldn't cope with it anymore. And he said, she's a nightmare to live with. And he described the mood swings. He was saying about we're having real problem. She's having her relationships. I think he used the word, her relationships are starting to struggle, which was news to me. And I think this is the value of helping others understand what menopause is too. Menopause isn't just something women need to know about. I think it was the fact that my husband was open enough to say, actually, this is going on as well, and she can't even see it. That does enable more women to get support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to be having experts speaking around how to speak to your husband or partner about this, how to include them in the conversation. We're going to go into great detail in almost everything you just said. We're going to dive into loads more detail with different experts. Okay. thank you for sharing your story. I was going to ask you to, and yeah, I'm really grateful that you would be so open, because it really does help to hear other women's experiences, I think. And you've helped me too, so thank you for that. Right, let's dive in and talk about menopause and the workplace and the amazing work that you're doing. One of your big messages, I know, is the importance of talking about menopause now. And I wonder if you could just speak to why now? Why is now the time in our whole history of humanity that we really must finally start talking about menopause?
Yes, and it is an important question, because menopause has been around forever, hasn't it? It's not new. As long as there've been women, there've been menopause, and the reality is every single one of us will go through it. And so we often get the question around why now, because our mums have been through menopause, our grandmas have been through menopause. So what is different? I think what's really different is the environment's different. Our lives are different now as women. I'm not saying that both my mum and my grandma, and I'm sure many of our relatives, used to work, but there are now more menopausal women in the workplace than there have ever been. There's 75 to 80% of menopausal women in work. We are an ageing population, and actually that means a couple of things. First of all, we are now around the stage where 1 in 3 of the workforce is over 50. And that's kind of unusual, and that is a demographic that's simply going to grow. So more over 50s in the workplace, more menopausal women. And one thing that surprised me actually was looking at some Department of Work and Pension statistics, because we say ageing population, but it's not until you start to peel it back that you say, well, actually this is what it means. But being an ageing population, we have a situation coming up where there will be half the number of school leavers or education leavers than there are vacancies in the system. So we really do need to keep menopausal women working. Actually, Age UK often tell me that they class older workers as over 45, which I think is a cheek, because I'm pretty sure I'm in my prime, in my 50s. But actually, more organisations need to have menopausal women in work to enable them to deliver what they want to or need to for their customers and run their businesses. And let's be fair, we're all working for so much longer. The majority of us will be working until our late 60s, maybe even longer. And we said earlier that the average age of menopause is 51, and symptoms starting years earlier. You could be 20 odd years post-menopause in the workplace. And if we want to be happy, healthy, and have good working environments, but you've got all of these symptoms going on, those two things don't really balance. They don't. It's something that does need to be sorted out.
Yeah.
Have I missed anything out there?
No.
I think there's also the element around what we all expect of our lives. I know my mother-in-law, when she first started, when she first knew what I was doing, my husband knew nothing about his mum's menopause other than his pa saying, be careful round your mum, she's not herself. Whereas when I talked to my mother-in-law about it, she was saying, I had a dreadful time for 10 years. And her GP just said to her, well, it's just that time of life. It's something you've got to get on with. And similarly, my mum's experience was the same. And maybe we're different. Maybe we're at the point of actually life's for living. I stand a 1 in 6 chance of living till I'm 100. And I'd much sooner be, I don't know, out on a bike in my 90s rather than in ill health. So maybe we have different expectations ourselves around what life should be like.
Yeah, I think we do. Tell me, when we were speaking a few days ago, you had a real bugbear around the word, when people call it N-word.
Yes.
Tell the audience why you've got such a bugbear about that.
Well, you know, Katie, I do hate it. If menopause as itself as a topic isn't mysterious enough, once you start codifying it, you're just adding to that level of mystery. Why do that? Menopause has a negative perception in a lot of different ways. But our experience of working with organisations, and actually thanks to Chief Constable Sue Fish, we often set people the challenge, if you like, of saying menopause 3 times a day. Because you very quickly desensitise to using the word. And so what we find is one of the comms professionals that I was working with in one of the organisations, she did say, she says, I've been doing the menopause 3 times a day. She said, I've got to say it works, because I used to say I'm on the menopause project. I never really said it out loud, and I'd feel a little bit embarrassed if when invitations came in my calendar that said menopause in it, because I thought people might think that's me, and I'm not ready for that yet. But she says I just say it now. I don't think about it. I say menopause loud and clear, and I don't feel the negative perception. So if we just say menopause, 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 and we all get into the habit of saying it, maybe we can get to the point where it is a natural phase of every woman's life. It's a simple stage that we will all achieve at some point with no embarrassment and being completely open about it. So yeah, you're right. I would really like to ban anything that codifies it or makes it sound like it's an insider's club.
Totally with you. I love it. Absolutely. Let's ban it. 100%. Right. Would you mind sharing what you and Henpicked are doing in the UK to change perceptions around menopause in the workplace?
Sure. Well, you know that we have henpicked.net, which is where we share our articles and the book. Shameless.
Totally.
Yeah, very pleased about this. We have 43 contributors for the book. So, yeah, I'm really proud of what the contributors have done. But what we set out with an ambition to change the perception and the culture of the UK. That might sound like a big deal, and I think it is, but I think it's doable. And we knew we could reach women through the website and through the book. And I was prompted by ITV. They got in touch with us and said, do you know any organisations with a menopause policy? So I rang a few HR directors that I know and said, do you have a menopause policy? And a couple of them came back and said, no, but if you've got one, I'd like to see it. So we carried on talking about it and said, well, okay, what would that mean? And developed, if you like, the work that we're doing now. We didn't just wake up one morning and say, let's go and put this into workplaces. The whole idea is through employers, we can reach more women, more men, more people to help change perception. And whilst you say earlier we've worked with 100 companies in the last year, to my mind, that's a reasonable start. We're going to try and double that target for this year. But 100 companies equals X number of women equals X number of people, not just menopausal women that we're reaching here. And I know you're covering this in the series this week, but men experience menopause too. They experience it secondhand, whether that's at home or in the workplace. So that is a start of more and more people knowing about this. And what we generally do, because most organisations we work with, they already have policies for things like flexible working, absence and sickness. And so they already have quite a lot of things in place. We're simply introducing the topic of menopause into that, and some great results as well. We've seen some firsts. Last year we saw the first energy company, the first water company, the first university to become menopause friendly, and I'm delighted to say that the majority of those organisations are also helping us educate the next tranche of people. We had our first menopause in the workplace conference in very early last year, 2017, And we explored the topic. What does it mean in terms of employment law? How would you support a menopausal woman? And of course, education on menopause. And at the beginning of this year, we had our second annual conference, because we might as well make it an annual conference, where the employers that we worked with the previous year came back and presented what they did, how they did it, and the results that they'd seen. So hopefully we can create this tsunami of awareness, not just us orchestrating it, but ambassadors and pioneering organisations being seen to be doing something that has a positive effect for their colleagues and also their workforce. And that's how we can make this spread faster.
Amazing, amazing. I might need to come to your next conference.
Yeah.
Wonderful. It's really, really important. And I love the way that you're targeting workplaces to then reach more. Like, why go to all the individual women in the UK when you can pull it?
Yes.
And
well, the whole subject of menopause, and this is why I think webinars like this are very important. It's a huge topic. If you think where we are now with perceptions and where we want to be, it's a big job. So we all have a role to play with that. For women, I think my ask would be, talk about it. Make sure that your husband knows about it, and it'd be great. I'm looking forward to the webinar about relationships. So we have a role to play in talking about it openly and being not feeling embarrassed about it. All of the supporting partners, you know, whether that's a work colleague, husband, family. We have a lot of young adults getting in touch with us and saying, actually, my mum's going through menopause. What can I do about it? How can I support her? And then we have the medical professionals and the British Menopause Society, natural approach experts. And I know you've got a few natural approach and medical experts later on in this week. If we're all pushing for the same ambition and we're all collaborating and working together, we can achieve this. We can get menopause at a point where, I don't know, Katie, imagine if menopause was nothing more than a natural phase in a woman's life, where it was only one day, where everybody understood what the symptoms were and what to look for, and therefore how to get help, what help was available to them. Then actually, if 1 in 4 women sail through menopause now, why can't we get to a point where every woman sails through menopause?
Yeah. Well, actually, when we were speaking the other day, you were saying this, that 25% of women don't experience menopausal symptoms. And you're really passionate about increasing that percentage, aren't you? So how do you think women can be having more of a symptom-free menopause? Like, what can we be doing? Like, how could we dramatically reduce the symptoms? What's your answer to that?
My answer would be, and I can guarantee at every menopause event that we run, we always cover the same things. This is menopause. This is what it means. This is what's going on in your body. These are the symptoms, and here are the different approaches to managing symptoms, both in the natural and the medical side. And I can guarantee at every session, that happened again last Thursday with several women who stayed behind after the event say, actually, that slide that you have that listed the symptoms, I've got that. I had no idea that was menopause. And whether that's physical symptoms or the psychological symptoms, a lady, and this is one that happens a lot. You mentioned brain fog earlier, but women talking about, I thought I had early onset dementia. I don't trust myself to remember things anymore. And we hear that quite a lot. So if we all understand what the symptoms are and what our options are, then surely we can achieve that.
Yeah, totally. For me, I would say the last year, there have been so many different things that have had me feel that I'm falling apart. And I found my work more difficult. I had to try harder to concentrate, to feel inspired, to be motivated. My monthly periods have been horrendous. And I've been to so many different people sought so much help. I've spent a freaking fortune on different things to try and fix it. But just the knowledge that I'm in perimenopause has shifted so much of it for me. It's almost like a lot of my symptoms have just calmed.
Yes.
I understand. I'm like, oh, like I'm not horribly unwell. You know, there's nothing wrong with me. You know, it was just that understanding helped me enormously. And then reaching out to all of these, I mean, I feel very blessed. I'm reaching out to like the top experts internationally to get direct help through doing this series. And already bit by bit, little pieces of information I am already applying to my life, and it's already feeling easier. So it's just awareness is the first step to change, isn't it? And
yes, it is. And we often say aware, care, and confident to act. The awareness is talking about it openly. The caring, the thing that we find very powerful is actually shared stories. Because when a woman, and particularly in an organisation, and particularly if it's a senior person, opens up and says, and we've experienced this for a few of the organisations we've worked with, when a senior person says, we've organised this is what I was experiencing, and share their story, it gives permission to talk about it openly. You're not trying to hide symptoms, you're accepting that you have them. And it does, I think it's a huge relief. For many women when they share their stories.
Huge relief. Yeah. Suddenly don't feel like I'm going crazy. In terms of menopause in the workplace, what's your big vision? Because I know you're the kind of woman that has beautiful big visions. So what is your big vision for UK businesses around menopause?
Of course, every organisation should have a menopause policy, or should have an approach to how they support menopausal women in the workplace. At the moment, we have the pioneering organisations who are starting to do this, but just as every organisation needs something in place for maternity, I'd like them to have something in place for menopause, and I don't see why not.
You're well on your way. How's about, should we see if we've got any questions? Let me see if I can work out this technology. We have one question, and anybody else watching live, it must be live if you're watching the recording, you won't be able to ask questions. If you're on live and you would like to ask Deborah questions, now is your time. If you are on Zoom, go to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, type in your question, and I will read it out to Deborah now, but we already have one in there. This is from Jean. And Jean is asking, do you think HRT was the only answer for you? How long do you perceive yourself being on the tablets? I heard 5 years was the maximum amount of time now. I actually have an expert on HRT later in the week, Jean, just so you know. But so Deborah.
Did I think HRT was the only solution? Absolutely not. Our approach, describe, not prescribe. So we believe the thorough education of natural and medical solutions are important, and every woman's different in terms of her symptoms, what she might be experiencing, and of course her medical background. But also we all have personal preferences. So Jean was saying, did I think HRT was the only solution for me? It was certainly the best solution at that time, and enabled me to stop taking painkillers within a month. Now, before that, it's impossible. I still don't take paracetamol unless I absolutely have to. I'd sooner have a glass of water and relax, calm myself down, take a bit of time out, and let my headache go away naturally rather than take a tablet. So, you know, I wouldn't say I'm a believer in medicalising menopause, or necessarily that I think, well, I certainly don't think the medical approach is the only way. I don't think it is at all. I think changes in lifestyle can make a significant difference to how a woman's feeling. You can tell that when you look at other parts of the world, because interestingly, we don't all experience menopausal symptoms. So if we look in Japan, they don't tend to get hot flushes in the same way that we do.
Talk about, could you share a bit more about that? Because
it was something that we discovered. Actually, we can do a fabulous session on menopause symptoms around the world. The difference is quite stark. So if we look in Japan, one of the ones that was recorded was cold shoulders rather than hot sweats. Now in Japan, they have a very different diet to us. They have high phytoestrogen diets. Your natural presenters will be able to talk to you more about that later on in the week. So, you know, when you start to look at the difference that lifestyle changes, exercise, nutritions can make, they can be, they've got to be considered as part of, if you like, the toolkit of approaches. It's interesting to see the research that's being done by Myra Hunter at the moment as well around CBT. Again, completely natural rather than taking a tablet. I was on bioidentical hormones, which are not regulated. I've now switched over to HRT, but I try to do a balance of both. I watch what I eat, I don't drink, I do exercise regularly. But for me personally, I feel great on the HRT, so I'm not going to stop taking it. And Jean's other question was around the 5-year limit.
Yeah, she said she's heard 5 years was the maximum amount of time now.
That is probably one of the biggest myths of menopause. Our GPs have people in their practice who are still on HRT in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and one of them's told us that lady in her 90s is still on HRT. She feels great on it. It's the right thing for her. She'll continue taking it. But this, the myth around 5 years is very often women tell us in our community that they go to their GP and they say, well, you can be on it for the next 5 years. The NICE guidelines are something, I'll post these in your Facebook group. The NICE guidelines are the things that GPs use to diagnose, on what they can recommend. And there is nothing in there that says 5 years.
Interesting. So I've got Dr. Wendy Denning, who's a Harley Street GP, speaking on, I think, Friday, all about bioidentical hormones and HRT, and how to speak to your doctor and what questions to ask and busting myths around it. So Jean, that's one for you to catch live.
Absolutely.
Recorded. But yeah, it really is. It's this is the piece around menopause, isn't it? It's not a one solution fits all approach at all.
No.
It's about, like, you might want to take a bit of natural, a bit of HRT, a bit of this, a bit of CBT, a bit of, you know, it's all about piecing together a puzzle that works perfectly for you, which is why my menopause. It's my it's got to be a solution that suits me as an individual, you know. So yeah.
Whatever works for you, and that's why the education around all of the potential. I mean, we have some women that say the lady care magnet works for them, acupuncture. I think all of our experts do yoga because it's good for your body, and anything that de-stresses you is good. So, you know, it really is. Every woman's different. Personal preferences are different, and find what makes you feel great.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We haven't got any more questions at the minute. You guys are being quiet. You've got an expert here at your fingertips. If you have any questions, please type them into the little Q&A box if you're on Zoom. If you're on Facebook and leaving any questions, hopefully Deborah will be able to find a little bit of time into her schedule to go in and answer those questions later. Deborah, let's move forward and let's just talk a little bit about your book quickly, if you wouldn't mind. So I know we've got a discount code, so people that have opted in to receive the series will have received an email already with the link, but just to say, you will get 30% off Deborah's new book, Menopause, A Change for the Better, by going to bloomsbury.com/menopause. That's bloomsbury.com/menopause. And you type in, all capital letters, my menopause 30, my menopause 30. You can get your discount. But Deborah, can you just let us know about the book? What's it all about? Why would
yes. Absolutely. It comes back to a lot of the things we've already covered, Katie, because our approach at Henpicked is respect for women and giving women the tools they need to sail through menopause. So it busts some of the myths, ones like genes there, a few of the other myths around HRT, pushing out symptoms, so many different myths. So it gets to it's called the Easy Guide to Menopause. We have 43 contributors, which are experts from across the UK, a lot like your series of webinars. So the experts, we also have women sharing their personal stories. I personally find those very interesting, because it's only when you start talking about it that you suddenly think, well, actually then I'm not on my own. Because so many women put up and shut up about menopause because they think they're the only ones experiencing it this badly. It also includes cartoons by the guy who does Private Eye. So it's got a little bit of a lift in it as well. And then it has resources at the end if anybody wants some signposting on where they can go to next. So I'm very grateful to all of the contributors that have brought this together. And we hope that it helps thousands and thousands of women and men live better lives from reading it. And I do say it's a flick through. It does say on the back, get yourself a glass of something or a cup of something and just flick through. It's an easy read. We wanted it to be in plain English and very, very accessible.
Wonderful. Congratulations. And it comes out officially on
Thursday. I know. And actually I've only got these 2 copies at the moment, so I've already put my own order in. But yes, what we hope is that it helps as many women and men as it can, and it works well with the website, and that we can continue reaching more and more organisations to help them understand what they can do to support women.
Yes. Absolutely. Congratulations. It's, as we were saying before we came on the call live, it's like giving birth, creating a book.
Yes, it was 2 years in the making.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Congratulations. It's wonderful. So we haven't got any more questions. So how about we wrap up with a key takeaway message that you would like to share with the audience today?
Key takeaway.
We've got one more question come in. Should we pause?
Okay. While I think about the key takeaway.
Yeah, have a little subconscious think about that. Julie has asked, any chance that you will be able to get menopause policy into national employment guidelines?
Good question. Actually, menopause is already covered under the the Equalities Act 2010. So it is already covered. So the personal characteristics of age and sex, menopause would be covered under that. And some people say that a couple of our employment lawyers have said that it could also be classed under the Disability Discrimination Act as well, because menopausal symptoms can last for that long. So all employers have to take menopause seriously, really. It's already in law. If a woman feels that she's being discriminated against on the back of menopausal symptoms, she can already take action, whether that's initially through a grievance policy within her organisation or talking to their HR. So there is already protection for menopause symptoms in the workplace. I often say about organisations having menopause policies, the different organisations we've worked with, not every organisation actually needs a policy. The more important thing is that the approach is written down. And what I mean by that, some organisations are heavily procedural. If I think about the police forces and fire and rescue teams, etc., every single thing that they do is procedural because that's the work they do. So if you didn't have a policy, then it would be very easy to not necessarily have the importance in that organisation. Another big university that we worked with, they have a policy for absolutely everything. So it was important that we named their document a policy, because otherwise it would have made it optional. Whereas other organisations we've worked with who have a very strong well-being, supportive culture, we haven't found the need for them to have a menopause policy. But what we have produced for them is, I can think of one where it reads more like a charter, another one where it's called the supportive guide, another one where it's more of a philosophy that fits into their well-being. The most important thing is it's written down. So whether that's a line manager looking at it and deciding, or working through with a colleague to say, actually, what can we do? How can we support you? So it's the writing it down, it's having it available, having it so that it can be referred to rather than calling it a policy. That's more important. We do know that the majority of women don't talk to their line manager about menopause, whether that's some of the things that we talked about earlier around perception, or whether they're embarrassed, or whether they may actually feel that they won't be. The government report that was published last July talked a lot about feeling like women may be discriminated against as a result of their menopause symptoms, or be seen on as past it, whether that's a woman's perception or whether that's their line manager's perception. So where was I going with that one? Yes, most women don't talk about it, so that's why it's important to have something there that they can print off to start the conversation. And when we talk about myths, and when we talk about some of the results that we've seen in workplaces, actually line managers have been more open, more up for talking about menopause than I think we probably even thought they would be going back a couple of years. So I think line managers' biggest fear, or certainly our experience, is they actually don't know anything about menopause. To give you an example, one line manager said, I don't feel confident having a conversation about menopause because I don't know anything about HRT or anything like that. Our feedback was, but you probably don't know an awful lot about an epidural, but you can have a maternity meeting. So once you get past that, and once we start to appreciate the conversation is very often similar to any sort of colleague line manager conversation, which is around, I don't know, if I was talking to you as my line manager, it would be, this is what I'm experiencing, these are my symptoms, this is how it's affecting me at work, this is what I'm doing about it, this is where I'd like a little extra help from you. A very simple structure. And we found line managers are fine.
It's a game-changing conversation though, isn't it?
It is, and because we've been doing this for some time now, it's great to go back into some of the employers where we've been working with them and hear the difference that it's made in the workplace. Line managers don't worry about it once you say, actually, you don't have to go off and solve it. You're not trying to solve the symptoms. You're trying to work out what's right for you, your colleague, your team member, for the organisation in approaching reasonable adjustments, which are very often tiny little things, a desk fan, maybe looking at flexible working while a woman's working through how to manage her symptoms. They don't have to be costly. They don't have to be difficult. But line managers find once they understand the concept of what a structure would look like, they're fine with it.
Yeah. It's really, as with all of this, it's having the conversation. That's just, and brilliant. A really great question. Thank you, Julie. I'm so glad you raised that. Jean's come back with another question, presuming it's the same Jean. How would you advise approaching your employer on the subject? Might have just covered that a little bit.
I think we kind of covered that in terms of the structure, but hopefully knowing that it's covered under the Equalities Act.
Jean's just saying you answered it, thank you.
Yes, but I do think preparation is everything for that conversation, because it is quite a new area. So make sure you do write your notes down, what are your symptoms, exactly as that structure, and do it's one of those tricky conversations, isn't it, where you can build yourself up and think, oh my goodness, this is probably going to be awful. But when you think your employer wants you happy, well, performing at your best, you want to be happy, well, performing at your best. Yeah. And it's a simple conversation that can happen. So you might have to take a bit of a deep breath before you open the conversation. But one of the, if you want to give yourself a little bit of courage, but one of the first organisations we worked with, because there is sometimes this perception of it being a difficult conversation with the line manager. But the first organisation we worked with, there was a lady that went through menopause, or a woman that went through menopause at 28. So she went through a very, very early menopause. And this shifted my perception of line managers. Her line manager was a young man in his early 30s. And this woman's view of him was he was her rock through all of this. She said, I was going through early menopause. It was difficult at home, because actually what that meant was that's why we couldn't conceive for the second child that we were hoping for. That's how we found out about it. So the home life was one of kind of a grieving. And when she was at work, she was severely struggling with symptoms. And her line manager, who knew nothing about menopause really, he was the one that would say, do you want to come over and have a chat? And he'd take her over to the window when he saw that she was struggling with hot flushes, and he would listen to how she was feeling. And she said he was absolutely, as she said, her rock through all of this. And because the way he approached it, it's nothing, it's just she's just having menopausal symptoms, organised desk plans for her. The rest of the team were very understanding for the reasons for the reasonable adjustments, and it changed their perception of it as well. So, some line managers are absolute heroes at this. So just jump in and have the conversation.
Totally. And you actually touched on a subject that we do have an expert this week who will be speaking about early onset menopause, because it does happen in your early 20s. Yeah. Can happen in your early 20s. It's, yeah.
Well, as you said, Katie, when we talked on the phone, and when it comes back to menopause, and maybe why we don't talk about it. In the UK, well, in the Western world, we're revered for youth and beauty. But what is a menopausal woman anyway? If you look in the media, we're all often doing this, and it's, it tends to be women in the 50s and 60s, which is fine, they're menopausal women. But actually 1 in 100 women will be going through menopause in her 40s. She may be experiencing perimenopausal symptoms in her 30s. I've just given the example of a lady that was in her 20s when she was going through menopause. And I've met somebody who was in her teens when she went through menopause. So actually, when you talk about what is a menopausal woman, what do we look like, this stereotype is really unusual, isn't it? I mean, what does a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old, 70-year-old, etc. What do we all look like? We're all very different. Yeah. So, we need to sort of educate that menopausal women aren't all the same.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So your key message that you would like to leave with the audience today?
Well, thank you very much for organising this, Katie, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series. I guess my key message would be, let's talk about menopause openly. No more embarrassment, no more taboo, no more M word. And then let's all join together to make sure that, following on from the awareness, that we have the education and support in place. And why can't we get to a place where menopause is nothing more than a natural phase of one day in time? We don't experience symptoms, and we know how to look after our longer term health. That's got to be worth working for.
Absolutely. And you and Henpicked are doing an amazing job at it. Thank you for the work.
Thank you.
It's been such a pleasure to have you. I feel like we could talk for hours, and we probably could, but let's wrap up. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you everybody who has joined us live. Thank you for the questions, and I will make sure this replay is available to everybody that wants to watch it as well. But lots of love, Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
See you later.